Simon Kirke, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm sorry I brought you half an hour sooner. Something came up and I didn't want to cancel because we've been trying to do this for a while. So anyway, here we are. And you were on the West Coast?
Yeah, California, Orange County. Yeah. So, hey, man, thank you so much for doing this. I mean, you've been in the soundtrack of our lives, basically. I mean, when I look at your body of work from Free Bad Company, I mean, you even played with Zeppelin, Wildfire, Ringo Starr, four tours, all your
Yeah.
solo projects and albums, Lone Rider. I mean, you've done
Wow.
a lot.
A lot, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny you should mention that because someone sent me an article from the Wall Street Journal. They've done the 50th anniversary of the release of the Bad Co album, which came out this week in 1974. Who knew?
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. Now, did you think your ride with, I mean, especially after Free happened, did you think Bad Company would last this long ever?
No.
Yeah, it's a miracle, really.
Well,
The
look,
top
I
10.
remember they asked Mick Jagger, God, he says, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 40.
Right. Yeah, look, he's still
I'll
going, right?
be 81. He's going to be
Yeah,
80.
that's yeah,
So,
amazing.
no, look, we back then, 50 years ago, I was 74. I was 24, and I was just glad to get out of Free, put that behind me because it was a lot of angst. It was a lot of, a lot of hassle and emotional turbulence. So to team up with Paul again, Paul Rodgers and Mick Rouse and Boz. It was great. And then also to become part of Led Zeppelin's record label. It was like a perfect storm. But I don't think anyone thought it would last as long as it did. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, awesome. Marcos has the next question for you.
So yeah, the Free live album
Huh.
was a big influence on me. I actually grew up in England. Um, I was
Where?
there in the 70s. Um, and so
Uh,
I determined that you were 21 years old when you recorded that record. And
no.
that's awfully young to have played with so much maturity. The song Mr. Big, for example, it's so slow,
Uh,
and the tempo is so in the pocket, and it starts with the drums.
mm,
And in a live situation, you've got the crowd and you've got the adrenaline pumping.
mm.
Was it just natural for you to play so hmm, with do you know what I mean?
I
It's
know. And I mean, Mr. Big, believe it or not, was the hardest, the most difficult song to play because to play that slow
yeah.
and fours on the hi-hat, do like a metronome, it wasn't even it wasn't eights,
Mm.
it was fours. So to play that slow and to maintain that BPM throughout the, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes, especially as it builds and builds and builds, and Andy Fraser does the bass solo, it
Hmm.
was very, very hard to do. And funny you should mention that because a few years ago, Warren Haynes from Government Mule, who's been a big fan of Free for all his life, he called me out of the blue and said, "Look, I'm playing the Beacon Theatre in New York, and I want to do Mr. Big. Would you would you like to come?" And because I live in Manhattan, and I said, "Fucking hell, Warren, I I haven't played it for 55 years, but I'll give it a go."
Mm.
And yeah, it all fell into place. But you're right. It was now, did I when Free was formed in '68, we went on a radio show called the John Peel radio show. He was a very famous DJ. And he said, now here's a band whose average age is 17. And Andy Fraser was 15, I was 19, Paul Rodgers was 19, Kossoff was 18. So we were a very young band from the get-go. And we matured. I mean, even though we were we were very young. There was a certain maturity about us that lasted, So yeah, and the live album was great. I mean, it was taken, I believe, from two shows,
Yeah.
Sunderland, Newcastle in the north of England, and Croydon, and it was a very good representation of what Free was about.
Yeah, and I even like the fact that they left in the recording during All Right Now, which I wasn't aware of until I bought this CD years later and read the liner notes. There's a part where the guitar playing, it stops and it sounds like a mistake. And what that was that was a fan coming up onto the stage and like giving Paul Kossoff a hug. And and it caused him to, I don't know, to not play.
The jack pulled out of the amp.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that they left that in.
Yeah, it was a bit of excitement, but we were just All Right Now had been this huge hit for us, and it had such a momentum, but that nothing could really stop us. And as long as I was still playing, the ceiling could have caved in, and we would have still carried on.
Yeah.
Now, did your experience playing blues even before Free help you with that laid back feeling that we're talking about?
Well, I don't know if you know my history, but there were 2 years between when I was, let me think, 14 and 16, where I played with a disco. And I played all sorts of different styles. When I say disco, it was the forerunner to disco. It was an old guy who had my school bus driver, believe it or not, who had two turntables and a stack of 45s. And we used to go around all these village halls playing the hits of the day and some older music. So, and he thought it'd be a good idea if I played drums alongside playing these records. So to answer your question, I hadn't really played the blues, but I had a very good sense of time, because if you're playing along to a track, an album, download, whatever you want to call it, you've got to be in time, otherwise it's a train wreck. And I learned very quickly to keep a good time. And one of the first songs that I played, believe it or not, was "Can't Buy Me Love" by the Beatles, and that swung like hell. Can't buy me love. And that was one of the first songs. And I kind of screwed it up the first couple of times. And the guy was saying, you've got to keep time, you've got to keep time. So then I joined Black Cat Bones, which was a down and out blues band. It was a proper blues band. And I learned a shuffle, boom, 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 boom. And I learned a slow blues, 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, all blues stuff. So that's when I really learned to play the blues, was the 6 months that I was in the Black Cat Bones with Paul Kossoff.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that carried into the bands after that feeling that you have to play with feel, otherwise it means nothing, really.
It means nothing, right?
Yeah.
And that carried over into Free, because I don't know if you know the history of Free, but Paul Kossoff and me left Black Cat Bones. He'd met Paul Rodgers, who was in another blues band across London, called Brown Sugar. And Paul, we were tired of playing the old standards, and we wanted to do a blues-based band, but our own material, but based on the blues. And that was once we got Andy Fraser, who'd been playing with John Mayall, even at 15. I mean, he'd done 6 or 7 months with John Mayall. So basically, Free was a blues band, a progressive blues, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about the first album, which was recorded at Headley Grange. Is that right?
Bad Company.
Yeah, the first Bad Company album.
Yeah. It was called it Headley Grange.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a good story behind that, because Zeppelin were there, and they weren't getting on. There was trouble within the ranks, and John Paul Jones left the band. He said he couldn't take all the carousing and the drugs and whatever, and he was fed up with it, and he quit. And so they were like, "Oh fuck, what do we do?" All the gear was still in Headley Grange, and our manager Peter Grant called Paul and said, "Listen, Zeppelin, one of the band has the flu, and they can't. You want to use the week or 10 days?" We said, "Hell yeah!" And we raced down there. We did the whole album in a week, and it was a wonderful place. I mean, it was. They had this great vibe. I believe Zeppelin had recorded there before, but all their gear was still there. So we had to move it all aside and put our own puny amps and drums. And as I said, we did the basic tracks in 4 days, and the mixing took about 3 days.
So pretty sure that when the Levee Breaks was recorded at Headley Grange. That's
right. Yeah, that's right. Because
it's famous for. So that first album, a lot of ballads on that record, which I like.
There was a Seagull and The Way I Choose. Don't Let Me Down. Yeah, I guess 3 or 4 ballads. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of playing those sort of songs. You're allowed to shine in those type of songs, and I think that you sound like an R&B drummer on some of that stuff to me.
That's all right. I'll take that.
Yeah, and I mean, you sounded so completely relaxed. It's almost like it sounds like. Go ahead.
No, I mean we were, because look, we've been playing those. Actually, we recorded 10 songs and took 8 from it. We've been rehearsing and practicing those songs for about 6 months.
Oh.
Because we were waiting. We did. I think we did 4 months as a trio, because we hadn't found a bass player.
Oh.
So the bottom line is, by the time we got to Headley Grange, we knew these songs inside out. So yes, we were relaxed. And you made a good point, Bill, that to play ballads well, it takes a certain skill, because it's not it's you got to be a little more thoughtful, a little bit more sensitive. And one of my favorite tracks was Ready for Love.
Yeah.
I still think that's some of my best drumming, and I was only 25. I go back to that a lot to listen to what I didn't play, what I left out.
Yeah, but what about the buzz roll, going into the second verse?
Yeah. Well, you can thank.
Who was playing like that back then?
I do a lot like. No, that was a direct copy
Ringo.
from Leave on Helm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Levon did this press roll, buzz roll in The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, and it knocked me sideways. And I use it a lot. I sometimes use it too much. And a lot of my tracks over the years, somewhere in there, there'll be a fucking buzz roll for a bar.
Well,
and it's Levon, God bless him.
I also wanted to know if that first album was recorded with the Ludwig kit that you got as a result of John Bonham getting you the endorsement with Ludwig. Was it that big black drum kit?
Yes, it was. And I still have it in the other room next door.
Oh, great.
That's awesome.
Don't sell it.
Yeah.
No. And I also want to know, was that a superphonic snare drum?
No, Black Beauty.
It was, okay.
Ah, okay. That's what you thought.
I did think that, yeah.
The Black Beauty.
I just noticed that.
It's been on every Bad Company song. I use it to this day. Solo shows and recording. It's never left my arsenal of drums. Never.
All right, great.
Oh, that's awesome. Hey, you've been working with Road Recovery for quite a while.
Yeah.
Just helping other people heal, which is so awesome. Do you feel that musicians in a way are natural healers, because we're sending vibrations through the air that make people feel good?
Well, that's a very good question. Number one, music is the only universal language. You can play a song in Tokyo and it will resonate to someone in San Diego or Boston to Argentina. It's a universal language. So musicians have two things going for them. They are purveyors of this message, this music, and a lot of them, like me, have had a history of substance abuse. So we can resonate. I know a lot of people, my contemporaries who are in the program, AA or NA, and I don't mind telling people that I had I had a history of drinking drugs and it nearly killed me. So when you say that to a kid or a teenager, adolescent, and you play drums or you play guitar, you play them a song, you've got them because here's someone who's been through what they're going through. And Road Recovery is an organization that helps troubled teens and adolescents. So when you play a song, or a riff or you sit behind the kit and teach them how to play a beat, they take to you because you are them 40 years on.
Right.
You've been where they're going through. So it's a wonderful organization. We've helped a lot of kids over the years, and I'll do it for as long as I can.
That's awesome. Marcos?
Yeah, I just am curious, how bad did the abuse get, with either you or some of your bandmates? I mean,
Oh, well, I nearly died. I mean, I
Wow.
nearly died. Yeah, I nearly flatlined.
how
Back when I was in the uh, when I was in my late 40s, early 50s, I was a complete lunatic. I survived. A lot of my friends didn't. We won't spend time on detailing the list of my contemporaries who died. I mean, you can go online and Google it, but a lot of people didn't make it. And I have to thank people like Eric Clapton and Elton John and Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper was the first person in rock and roll that I remember to say, I'm Vince, his name is Vince Fernier, and I'm an alcoholic. And that was back in the early 70s. Eric got sober a few years later, and Elton a few years later after that. But until someone in my world had the balls to to say alcohol is getting the better of me and I want to stop and I need help, it's a wonderful thing to share that sort of experience with other people.
Boy, I wish we could have got John Bonham to do that.
Oh man, me too. I miss
He
him.
would he'd still be going today and he
I
could have
think
done
about
solo
him
albums.
most days. Yeah, he would. He was only 32 when he died. And, I mean, what Zeppelin could have done, I mean, was just what they achieved in a relatively short amount of time is off the charts. But
Yeah.
Jimmy had his own problem with heroin, and it was only, Zeppelin were in two camps. You had John, Paul, and Robert, who were pretty sober. They had a glass of wine now and again.
Mhm.
You had Jimmy, and Bonzo was a one-man wrecking crew. And that's really what, when he died, Zeppelin said, that's it. We can't go on. And they didn't. And I think all credit to them that they didn't, because they are still the number one rock band in history, with that 8 years of making music.
Yeah, it's like the mystique and the legacy. They said that's it. And even John Paul Jones said, we had lightning in a bottle. We can't recreate that. That was then, let's move on. And that made it even bigger.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, between you, me, and the gatepost, as we say in England, I think they could have gotten Jason. Jason was a wonderful drummer, John's son.
Right.
What he did at the O2 gig, I mean, yeah, they could have gone on the road. I really think they could, because Jimmy was a lot better. He was kicking his habit. But wow, you see that?
I don't know what that
that?
is.
Oh,
Well,
Jimmy,
That was the ghost of John Bonham.
yeah.
Jimmy
Oh,
must have heard me.
wow.
I really think they could have continued after a couple of years, but it was, it wasn't to be, and there it is. So
Okay, I think I'm up next. So the Straight Shooter album,
yeah.
Black Beauty snare again, but really radically different sound to me from the first album. A tighter sound. Was that
Yeah.
Was that sort of something that the producer said, let's try, or is this something that you was it just more
No,
muffled on this
we
one
never
song?
had a producer. We never
Oh,
had we were the producers.
oh,
We had a very good engineer, and for various legal reasons, we had to have so and so as a producer, Ron Neverson or whatever. But we produced the sound. A very good question, Marco. And I'll tell you the reason there was a different sound was the first album. We had only been together as a four-piece a few months. You know, I played with Paul in Free, and but we'd never actually played. We'd rehearsed together the songs, but by the time we did Straight Shooter, we'd done a couple of tours of England and tours of America. So we were a cohesive unit as four guys who had played together through many, many shows. And as you know, musicians, it's on stage where you really get the bond. And by the time we came to 1975, we'd been around the world and we'd done possibly 100, 120 shows together. So the sound was tighter. It was the Bad Company sound that we know and love today.
well, the sound of the Black Beauty on the first album, it sure fits those songs. You know what I mean? And I can't imagine those songs sounding any different, really. I'm glad the way they sound on that record, and I'm glad the way everything else sounded after that.
Well, I think we were professional musicians. Obviously, I worked with Paul, and the songs were not rocket science. They weren't like Rush, or they weren't prog rock. You know, they were straight ahead. So we were good, seasoned musicians with experience, and so the songs came very easily. But there was something about the first album and the second album where Straight Shooter was the first true Bad Company album, in that we had done all these shows together and we were a melded or a molded unit. And I love Straight Shooter. It's
Yeah.
my favorite album.
Okay.
We had Feel Like Making Love, Good Loving on Bad. We had Shooting Star,
Mhm.
Weep No More. I mean, there were some really, really good songs on that.
Yeah.
So,
Anna.
and Anna, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was one of my favorites because it had so many of your trademark fills and
Yeah.
just
Ah.
I was watching that YouTube clip where you were playing with Government Mule,
Yeah.
and it seemed like you were mouthing some of the drum beats when you were playing.
I
Like
do that.
verbalizing. Do you
I
do
do.
that naturally?
In fact, I didn't realize I was doing it until I woke up one morning after a session, and my voice was really hoarse, and I thought maybe I had something wrong. And I went into the studio, and the guys, I couldn't talk properly. And the engineer said, "Well, it's because you grunt.
Oh, okay.
Hey, listen to this." And he isolated all the drums, and I'm going,
Oh,
like
right.
I'm having a really hard shit, you know.
Ah,
And it's like, fucking hell, I had no idea. So very good, Bill. I mean, what you just said, yeah, I grunt when I play, and nothing I
and
can do.
Bonham did that too, right?
Possibly,
I
yeah.
think the same thing when they analyzed him. He sounded like a bear.
yeah.
It was just like, whoa, he is feeling it right from the heart. Because I
Yeah.
think that's your soul coming out and saying, hello, here I am. It's
Yeah. Well, it's exertion. It's what you do when if you're in the gym, you do squats. It's
right.
it's a release when you're boom, bang, boom, bang, boom, boom. Anyway,
Well, there's an isolated drum track of Whole Lot of Love, and Bonham is yelling through it.
I heard it. It's
I
wonderful.
mean, it's incredible. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I love him.
and
He does that little turnaround. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, back, ba-bum, ba-bum, bum. He leaves out that beat.
right.
Ba-bum, ba-bum, on like a double ba-bum, ba-bum on the bass drum. It's
Mm-hmm.
just so clever. Not clever, it's just different.
Yeah.
I played that in tribute bands and I never get it right.
Oh,
Tried Black Dog, I can't do Black Dog. And
oh.
Bonzo was a special, he really was a special drummer.
Mm-hmm.
He had so much power, but
Very funky.
yeah, he was funky.
Okay, now how did the session with Wilson Pickett come around? And that must have been sort of a career highlight, right? Because I would imagine he was a big influence.
Yeah. Well, I knew this guy, this producer named John Tiven, and he used to come and see me in the village, in the Greenwich Village, when I was playing with some friends. And he saw me backstage. He told me what a fan he was of Free. Not particularly bad company. He loved Free. And he said, look, I'm producing an album with Wilson Pickett next month. Would you be one of the drummers? Because there was another drummer, believe it or not, called Todd Snare. I said, you got to be kidding. That's his real name. Yeah, Todd Snare. He said, you do half the album, Todd will do the other. I said, I'm there. Are you kidding? I'd love to. And I went in and I was a bit nervous because I'd never played with a real legend, someone whose records I've been listening to since I was a kid. And he was there. He was very nice. He's a little bit of a Black Panther, you know. He's like a bit sort of, you know, surrounded by white guys. He was, especially me, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. But I was, you know, good afternoon, Mr. Pickett. How are you, sir? You know, because I looked up to him. And we started rehearsing a song. And he said, stop, stop. I thought, oh, fuck, what have I done wrong? He said, let's take it. It sounds great. Wow. So one of the tracks, I forget which one, was actually a run through that we went to the end. And he said, no need to record, it's done. That's it. Let's do the next song. So it was a real education working with someone like that who relied purely on feel. He didn't give a fuck about if the tempo was right and the feel was right, that's it. And yeah, a real education, a real character, man. And what a great singer.
What album can we find that on?
It's called It's Harder Now.
Okay.
Like, I guess life is harder. It's harder now.
Okay.
I guess 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago it came out, but it's a good album, real good. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, I was listening to the Isle of Wight Bad Company Live 1970. Your bass drum tone was really nice and full. Good, like live tone.
Free or Bad Company?
No, I think it was bad. Was that Free then?
Bad Company never did Isle of Wight. Free.
Did you use a certain muffling, like the felt strips, or what did you have going on with that bass drum?
I've no idea.
Okay.
I mean, look, there were when you play in front of 500,000 people, you don't muffle anything.
Oh, okay.
And no, I mean, I just loosened. No, I tell you what it was. It was a hot day, and I had these. I mean, they weren't calf skin, but they weren't the plastic heads that we know and love today.
Okay.
So the heat probably tightened the skin and gave it an extra punch.
Right.
That's all it was. I really didn't tune them very. I only learned about tuning a few years later. I just played them and tuned them as I thought they would sound. But the bass drum, and also, you know, there's a lot of nervousness behind that delivery on the bass drum. I was pounding those drums, and that's why the kick drum cuts through so well, I think.
You could even hear if the beater didn't release and stayed on the head, you can even hear that in the recording. Wow. Which is really amazing that it sounds that good that you can hear that. You know? Yeah. And what do you do today for your bass drum muffling if you're in the studio? Do you have the head on, the head off? What do you put in?
No, I if possible, I'll have a hole cut and have a cushion inside because I still use big drums. Put an SM57 or there's an AKG, a square mic just in front of it. You've got to be careful with kick drums. They're very powerful.
Right.
Positioning, as you know, the positioning of the mics is absolutely crucial. But I do dampen them down because you can add look with software and outboard gear now. You can do so much with drum sounds. You don't really need to be, as long as you've got a good signal, you can pretty much do whatever you want with drums now.
Let's see. I wanted to bring up the song "Call on Me," which is on Straight Shooter.
Wow.
Now, it's you're going into the last verse, you're on the ride cymbal.
Yeah, yeah.
8 notes on the ride cymbal. Halfway through the verse, you go to the hi-hat.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, I'm glad they left that, because it shows that they're not going for perfection. They're going for the best feel, right? And it's probably only drummers that would notice it.
Yeah, I'd forgotten all about that. And probably the reason is that I normally go to the ride when there's a guitar solo or a solo other than vocals.
Mm.
And I go back to a hi-hat because when you go back on the hi-hat, everything comes, you know, it sort of tightens up.
Yeah.
So I might have just thought, oh, fucking hell, quick, get back on the hi-hat. That's all it was, you know, a
Well,
little.
the album sold how many millions, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Quite a few million, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow, I never thought of that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, check it out, Mick.
That's the reason for that one, anyway.
Now,
Yeah.
are you doing rim shots on 2 and 4 for like every song you play? Or are you hitting the middle of the drum, or are you a rim shot guy all
Try
the
and
time?
hit the middle. No, I obviously, you know, rim shots are a very exotic piece of drumming. There's one on Moving On towards the end. There's a rim shot where the stick hits the rim and the drum, and it,
Right.
as you know, produces this metallic
Yeah,
gunshot.
right.
Will. But no, I couldn't do that. If you tried, number one, you can't do it every beat because you got to be so precise,
Perfect.
and it would be overkill. You know, you use rim shots as a highlight, not as a staple diet of the rhythm.
Okay.
So, and I do try and hit dead center because, as you know, if you just go off that sort of silver dollar size
Right.
circle, you get the bing, you get that ring. And I don't like dampening my snare. I will do a little bit. I like a tiny bit of ring to give it lift, but you don't want that bing. You want bing, bing.
Right. Decay,
Yeah.
short decay, Marcos.
Yeah, I just want to mention also that, let's see, you put out some solo albums, and I know that you play, in addition to drums, guitar, piano.
Yeah.
Did you play any of the piano on the solo records? And did you play any lead guitar on those solo?
No. I'm not a very good lead guitarist. I mean, I love listening to great guitarists, but no, I'm not a good lead guitarist. I'm a pretty good rhythm guitarist and chords, and I'd write mostly on guitar, secondly on piano. But did I play piano? On most of my solo albums, yes, I did play the piano. But when I played with the Empty Pockets, which are all because of you, that the last solo album, they have a very good keyboard player, and I'll let him play piano on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. You know, I've got fond memories of rock and roll fantasy. I was just kind of nearing my end of high school, and I remember hearing those electronic drums, like they were like sin drums in the background.
Yeah.
And I absolutely loved it. To this day, I still love it. Was that the sin drums, those little like
Sin drums, yeah. Paul Rodgers was playing them. He couldn't stop playing the bloody things. I mean, we got them kind of as a gimmick. I never really liked them. You know, I'm a traditionalist,
Right.
but Paul loved them. And in fact, when we did the overdub, he said, you know, can I play them? I said, of course you can.
Wow.
He went fucking crazy. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Like, well, bring it down a bit, you know, just. So he played and we pulled them in and out when we needed them, you know.
So I'm sort of imagining someone like John Bonham giving you guys a hard time about using the electronic syndromes.
Oh, give us a hard time because of the syndromes?
Yeah.
No, I don't think he made any comments, but he was like me. He was a traditionalist, but he had bloody timpani, you know. And,
Yeah,
right.
But he used them.
But I don't think he would have gone near.
No, probably
Yeah,
not. Probably not.
And I imagine that if John Bonham were still playing drums, he'd be using the same size kit.
Probably.
Oh, no
Yeah.
question. No question.
Yeah.
If you look at some early live stuff, he used this horrible green Ludwig 4-piece with flapping cymbal, you know, 2 cymbals and a hi-hat, the basic kit. And he never really added to that.
Right.
He played double bass drum, and thank God he never played twin toms or twin floor toms. He was a strict 4-drum man. God bless him. Yeah.
Yeah, and it always sounded like him. Didn't matter what he played.
Right.
Now, how comfortable were you on his kit when you played with Zeppelin in Munich?
Well, they brought up another kit.
Oh,
They
okay.
had a spare kit, and it might have been his spare. You know, most drummers of that echelon have a spare kit backstage. Certainly a spare bass drum, and certainly a spare snare.
Right.
Because if those 2 drums go, you have a break in the head, the whole performance stops.
Yeah.
You know, you have to change. So there's always a spare bass drum and a spare snare. Toms never break, and if they do, what the fuck? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So they brought out, I assume it was John's spare kit,
Okay.
and I took to it straight away. We're pretty much the same build, same height. I might have adjusted the seat a little higher, but no, it was a 4-piece kit, and that's what I was used to. But we will continue this.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right, guys.
Lunch.
Really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Great.
Pleasure. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.